The knock that wouldn't stop. Most nights, Clara loved living alone. Her small ground-floor apartment wasn't fancy, but it was hers. After years of bad roommates and noisy shared housing, she relished quiet. She would make herself tea, curl up with a book, and drift to sleep with the comfort of silence around her. But that silence was broken one night, and she never forgot the sound that shattered it. The first knock. It was a Wednesday in late October, the kind of chilly night when the wind rattles loose branches against windows. Clara had gone to bed early, wrapped in blankets, her phone plugged in on the nightstand. Around 1:45 a.m., she woke up, not to the wind, not to a dream, but to a knock. 3 sharp raps at her front door. Knock, knock, knock. Clara sat up, heart thudding. Who would knock at this hour? She lived in a quiet suburban complex, and her neighbors kept to themselves. She told herself it was probably nothing. Maybe someone drunk had the wrong apartment. Maybe kids playing a prank. She held her breath. And then it came again. Knock, knock, knock. The waiting. Clara grabbed her phone and checked the time. 1:47 a.m. She texted her friend, but no reply. She thought about calling the police, but hesitated. What would she even say? Someone knocked on my door twice? She crept into the living room, barefoot, her apartment cloaked in darkness. The only light came from the faint orange glow of the street lamp outside. Slowly, she approached the front door. She didn't open it. She didn't even touch the handle. Instead, she peered through the peephole. Nothing. The front porch was empty. Clara let out a shaky breath and backed away. Maybe it really was just kids. She returned to bed, pulling the blankets tight around herself. The second round. At 2:13 a.m., the knocks came again. Knock, knock, knock. Louder this time. Clara sat bolt upright, her skin prickling. She didn't move right away. She just listened. A minute passed. Then another. Silence. Then, faintly, she heard something else. A dragging sound, like someone slowly running their fingernails across the wood of her door. She clutched her phone and dialed 911 with trembling hands. The dispatcher answered, calm and professional. Clara whispered what was happening. The operator told her to stay on the line, keep the doors locked, and wait for an officer to arrive. Clara stayed in her bed, every nerve on fire. The dragging stopped. The police. 10 minutes later, she saw flashing red and blue lights through her bedroom window. She bolted to the door and opened for the officers, relief flooding her chest. 2 uniformed men stood on her porch. One shone a flashlight across the ground. "Ma'am, we checked the perimeter," one said. "No signs of forced entry. No footprints. Are you sure someone knocked?" "I swear I heard it," Clara said, her voice shaking. "Twice. And scratching, too." The officers exchanged a glance, but nodded. Could be kids playing pranks. "We'll drive through the neighborhood. Keep an eye out." They left, leaving Clara standing in the doorway, hugging herself against the cold night air. She locked the door again, checked it twice. The return. By 3 a.m., she was still wide awake. She sat in the living room with every light on, watching TV at low volume, trying to convince herself everything was fine. And then, knock, knock, knock. Her blood turned to ice. It was the exact same rhythm. She didn't move this time. She didn't call the police again. She just sat frozen, staring at the door. The knocking stopped, but a moment later, she heard whispering, faint, muffled, coming from the other side of the door. Her name, Clara, the window. She couldn't take it anymore. She ran to her bedroom, shut the door, locked it, and curled on the bed, clutching her phone like a lifeline. Minutes passed. Then she heard something new, a tapping sound, not at the door, but at her bedroom window. She turned her head slowly. Through the curtains, she saw the faint outline of a hand, pressed flat against the glass. Her phone slipped from her grasp. The hand slid downward, leaving a streak across the fog glass. Then it was gone. The aftermath. By morning, Clara hadn't slept at all. She sat awake, trembling, waiting for daylight. When she finally gathered the courage to check the window, her stomach lurched. There was no streak. No sign of a hand. And when she checked the front porch, she saw nothing unusual. No marks, no footprints. Her friends told her it was a nightmare. The police chalked it up to nerves and bad dreams. But Clara knows what she heard. And to this day, sometimes in the dead of night, when she's drifting between sleep and waking, she swears she hears it again. Knock, 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 followed by the whisper of her name. The man on the road. Some people find late-night drives peaceful. The quiet roads, the hum of tires on asphalt, the sense that the world is asleep and you're alone with your thoughts. But for Daniel, one midnight drive home turned into a memory so disturbing that he still refuses to drive alone at night. The drive. Daniel was 22, finishing a late shift at a diner on the outskirts of town. He'd driven the same route home dozens of times, a lonely two-lane highway cutting through miles of farmland. It was the kind of road where you could go 10 minutes without seeing another set of headlights. That night, his shift had dragged. He was exhausted, eyelids heavy, but the clock on the dashboard glowed 12:23 a.m. He only had about 45 minutes left until he'd be home. The radio murmured softly as he drove. Outside, darkness pressed against car windows, broken only by his high beams stretching across the empty road. Then, up ahead, he saw him, the figure, a man, standing in the middle of the road. Daniel's stomach lurched. He hit the brakes, tires squealing, the car lurching as it slowed. The figure didn't move. Daniel gripped the steering wheel, heart pounding, and flicked his high beams to get a better look. The man was tall and thin, wearing a torn jacket and jeans. His head was bowed, his hair hanging in his face. He stood barefoot on the cold asphalt. Daniel rolled down his window an inch. "Hey, you okay?" The man didn't respond. The approach. Unsure what else to do, Daniel pulled aside of the road, hazard lights flashing. He kept his engine running as he stepped out of the car. The night air was frigid, carrying the faint smell of cut hay and damp earth. "Sir," Daniel called again. "Do you need help?" The man slowly raised his head. Daniel froze. The man's eyes glowed faintly in the headlights. Not a reflection, not like animal eyes. They glowed on their own, pale and unnatural. His mouth curved into a smile too wide, showing too many teeth. Daniel's instinct screamed at him to get back in the car. The chase. He didn't hesitate. He bolted back into the driver's seat, slammed the door shut, and floored the gas. The car roared forward, tires screeching as he swerved around the figure. For a moment, relief washed over him, until he checked the rear-view mirror. The man was running. Not walking, not stumbling. Running. On all fours, his limbs jerking unnaturally, keeping pace with the car. Daniel's breath caught in his throat. He pushed the pedal harder, the speedometer climbing. At 70 miles per hour, the figure finally began to fall behind. But just before the headlights swallowed him in darkness, Daniel swore he saw the man stand upright again, grinning as though amused. The gas station. Shaking, Daniel drove another 20 minutes before spotting the glow of a 24-hour gas station. He pulled in, parked under the harsh fluorescent lights, and sat there trembling. The attendant came out, a tired-looking man with cigarette hanging from his lips. "You all right, buddy?" Daniel nodded quickly. "Yeah, just long night." But his hands wouldn't stop shaking. He stayed at the gas station for nearly an hour before convincing himself to get back on the road. The rest of the drive home was uneventful, though he couldn't stop glancing in the rearview mirror. The aftermath, when he told his co-workers the next day, they laughed. "Sounds like a crackhead," one said. Another joked, "You've been watching too many horror movies, man." But Daniel wasn't convinced. Weeks later, he heard a local news report. A truck driver had swerved off the very same road and crashed. When investigators arrived, they found the driver dead, but not from the crash. His body was found 30 feet from the wreck, sprawled in the middle of the road. His shoes were missing. His expression was frozen in terror. And though the police never mentioned on air, a paramedic who later spoke off the record swore the driver's mouth had been stretched into an unnatural grin. The haunting memory. Daniel doesn't drive that road anymore. If he works the late shift, he takes the long way home, even if it adds an extra hour. Sometimes, though, when he's driving at night and the road gets too quiet, too empty, he feels it again, that same icy chill creeping down his neck. And in his mind, he sees glowing eyes in the headlights, a smile too wide to be human. And he prays at this time it stays only a memory. Footsteps in the attic. For most of her life, Emily had been a light sleeper. The creak of a floorboard, the hum of an appliance, anything could wake her in the middle of the night. She thought it was just nerves, the side effect of living alone in a small house. But one night, she realized sometimes waking up at the wrong time and hearing something you were never meant to hear. The wake up. It was just after 2 a.m. when Emily woke to the sound of footsteps. At first, she thought it was a dream. She blinked in the darkness, heart pounding, straining to listen. Then she heard it again, slow, deliberate steps coming from above. Her attic. Emily lived in a single-story house. The attic wasn't finished space. It was just insulation beams and old storage boxes. Nobody had any reason to be up there. Yet the sound was undeniable. The distinct creak of someone shifting their weight on the wooden boards. Rationalizing, she tried to convince herself it was just animals. Maybe a raccoon or squirrel had gotten in. It had happened to neighbors before. But as she lay still, she noticed something that made her blood run cold. The footsteps weren't scattered or frantic, like an animal scurrying. They were paced, heavy, human. Step, pause, step, pause, right above her bedroom. Gathering courage, Emily slipped quietly out of bed, every movement deliberate. She grabbed her phone and tiptoed into the hallway. From the hall, she could see the small square hatch in the ceiling that led to the attic. It was closed, but just barely. The corner sagged a fraction, as though it hadn't been pushed shut all the way. Her throat went dry. She dialed 911 with shaking hands. When the operator answered, Emily whispered, "Someone's in my attic." The dispatcher told her to stay on the line, lock herself in a room, and wait for the officers. But Emily's eyes stayed fixed on that hatch, because as she spoke, she saw it move. A tiny shift, as though someone up there had leaned against it. The descent. Minutes passed like hours. The dispatcher kept her calm as Emily locked herself in the bathroom, clutching her phone like a weapon. And then came the sound she feared most. The creak of the attic hatch swinging open. Emily clamped her hand over her mouth to stifle a sob. She heard a heavy thump as someone dropped onto the hallway floor. Slow, heavy footsteps moved down the hall, right past the bathroom door. The police. The sound of sirens split the night. The footsteps stopped. Emily heard a scramble, the sound of a door opening somewhere in the house. And then silence. The police pounded on her front door, announcing themselves. When she finally opened the bathroom door, shaking, the officers swept the house with flashlights and weapons drawn. They didn't find anyone, but the attic told a different story. The discovery. One of the officers pulled down the hatch and climbed up. His flashlight beam swept across the insulation and beams. Then he called down, "Ma'am, you'll want to see this." Emily followed, heart hammering. The officer shone his light into the far corner of the attic. There, nestled between boxes of Christmas decorations and old suitcases, was a small pile of belongings. A sleeping bag, empty food wrappers, a half-empty water bottle. Someone had been living up there. For how long? No one could say. The chilling detail. The officers dusted for prints, checked the doors and windows, but found no signs of forced entry. It was as though the intruder had simply appeared one day and made himself at home above her head. But what chilled Emily most wasn't the thought of him sleeping up there. It was what she found tucked inside one of the boxes that had once held her family's photo albums. A notebook. Inside were pages filled with her name. Over and over, scrawled in messy handwriting. Sometimes with hearts. Sometimes with violent scribbles across her face, drawn from photographs she hadn't realized were missing. The police took it as evidence. But Emily never forgot the last entry, written in shaky letters across the page. "I like watching you sleep." Aftermath. Emily moved out within the month. She never spent another night in that house. The police never caught the man. No one ever explained how he got in or how long he had been there. But Emily knows one thing for certain. She hadn't woken up by accident that night. Something had told her to open her eyes. And she still wonders what might have happened if she hadn't. The last patient. Hospitals are supposed to be places of healing. But when the clock ticks past midnight, their sterile hallways and fluorescent lights take on a very different character. No one knows it better than Marcus, a night shift security guard who swore he'd never work in a hospital again after what he experienced one winter night. The routine. Marcus had worked night security before malls, warehouses, even a university campus. The hospital gig sounded easy in comparison. His shift started at 11 p.m. and ended at 7 a.m. He made rounds, checked locked doors, and occasionally dealt with unruly visitors in the ER. Most nights were uneventful. The building was quiet, the patients asleep, and the staff preoccupied with paperwork. But he soon learned that hospitals don't stay quiet forever. The call. It was just after 2:30 a.m. when Marcus received a call over his radio. "Marcus, can you check the east wing on the third floor?" A nurse reported movement down there. That wing had been shut down for renovations. It shouldn't have had anyone inside. Marcus grabbed his flashlight and headed for the elevator. When the doors opened on the third floor, he was greeted by silence. The hallway stretched ahead, dimly lit by flickering fluorescent lights. Dust sheets covered furniture. The smell of antiseptic lingered faintly in the air. The first glimpse. As he walked, Marcus noticed something strange. One of the patient room doors stood ajar. He pushed it open with the edge of his flashlight. Inside, the room looked abandoned, except for the bed. Someone was lying there, an old woman, her skin pale and wrinkled, her hospital gown stained. Her eyes were wide open, staring at the ceiling. Marcus' stomach dropped. "Ma'am, are you okay?" The woman slowly turned her head toward him. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. The vanishing. Marcus stepped forward cautiously. He reached for his radio. Dispatch, there's a patient in." He froze. The bed was empty. The sheets were perfectly smooth, as if no one had ever been there. Marcus blinked. His breath caught in his throat. He swept the room with his flashlight. Nothing. Just dust, shadows, and peeling paint. He backed out of the room, heart hammering, and forced a nervous laugh. "I'm overtired. I imagined it. That's all." But deep down, he knew better. The sound. Marcus resumed his patrol, moving faster now. He just wanted to finish and get back to the main station. That's when he heard it. Footsteps. Slow, dragging footsteps echoing down the hallway behind him. He spun, flashlight beam cutting through the shadows. The hall was empty, but the footsteps continued, growing louder, closer. They didn't sound like one person. They sounded like many. The encounter. Marcus gripped his radio again. "Dispatch! I need another unit on the third floor east wing now." No response. Just static. His flashlight flickered, dimmed, then steadied again. And then he saw them. At the far end of the hallway, half hidden in shadow, a line of figures stood. Hospital gowns. Bare feet. Heads bowed. Patients, but not alive ones. Their skin was gray. Their faces hollow. Some had tubes trailing from their arms. Others gaping wounds that never bled. They stood perfectly still, facing him. Marcus' chest seized with panic. And then, in unison, they began walking toward him. The escape. Marcus ran. His boots pounded against the tile as he sprinted for the stairwell. The air behind him grew colder, heavy with the sound of dozens of bare feet slapping the floor. He slammed through the stairwell door, leaping down the steps two at a time. His flashlight clattered to the ground, but he didn't stop to grab it. On the second floor landing, he risked a glance back. The stairwell was empty, but the door above him creaked open on its own. The basement. Marcus didn't stop until he reached the basement level. His lungs burned his chest tight. He shoved through the door and staggered into the maintenance corridors. Down here, the lights were dimmer, the air damp and heavy with the smell of mildew. He leaned against the wall, sucking in air, telling himself over and over, it wasn't real. It wasn't real. But then, faintly, he heard it again, the dragging footsteps. and a voice, a whisper, low and rasping. "Stay with us." The rescue, Marcus bolted, sprinting through the maze of corridors until he found the service elevator. He jammed the button repeatedly until the doors opened. The ride up felt endless. He kept his eyes locked on the doors, praying nothing slipped inside before they shut. When the doors finally opened to the lobby, the bright fluorescent lights and bustle of the night staff nearly made him collapse with relief. The nurses glanced at him curiously, but no one said a word. He staggered back to his station, pale and shaking, and didn't leave his post again until his shift ended. Aftermath. The next morning, Marcus told his supervisor what happened. He expected to be laughed at or reprimanded. Instead, his supervisor just gave him a long, tired look. "You saw them, didn't you?" Marcus frowned. "Saw who?" "The patients," the man said softly. "This place has been open nearly 80 years. Thousands have died here. Some don't move on." Marcus quit a week later. He never worked another hospital job. But sometimes, when he's up late at night and the house is too quiet, he swears he can still hear it. The dragging footsteps. And the whisper, "Stay with us."